Hello travelers, and welcome to the New GM's Tavern. I am your GM and friendly tavern keep, Christian. In today's video, we will be talking about what a tabletop role-playing game is, and we will also discuss overarching rules that most TTRPGs include. So to start off, what is a tabletop role-playing game? A tabletop role-playing game, or TTRPG for short, is a game where you, the player, creates a character based entirely off their own imagination. You control your character by using dialogue and occasionally acting things out. And by doing this, your character can do almost anything in the game world. Now, I say almost anything because while in tabletop role-playing games, you are free to do whatever you set your mind to, it has to be within the confines of the rules, the game world, and most importantly, logic. If your actions don't make sense, then they're not going to happen. Either your GM isn't going to allow it, or the world itself isn't going to allow it because of physics, or because of background lore, or something or other. One of the worst situations that a lot of new GMs and players end up finding themselves in is something along the lines of this. Your party enters the village, beaten, battered, and bleeding. A teammate lays dying in your arms and you have no heal potions. As you walk up to the village store, you remember that you spent all your gold in the village prior, yet you must get your hands on a heal potion to save your teammate. What do you do? Oh yeah, no, guys, I got this. So I walk up to the storekeep. Okay. And I place my hand on the counter with an intimidating presence, and as I stare into his eyes, I say, "Sir, give me one of your finest healing potions." And from under my palm, a pile of gold coins grows. Excuse me? Yeah, no, my player can create gold from their very being. Okay, I got a couple questions for you. One, how does that work? What ability or spell are you using? And if this is biological, how? How does that work biologically? And also, in your background story, you said that you came from an extremely poor village and your parents were indentured servants and they got killed by a rough master. So if you could always do this, why didn't you just pay your parents out of slavery way back when? Yeah, I see what you mean. Okay. Well then, in that case, I punch the storekeep in the face and steal a potion. Yep, of course you do. You see what I mean? Encounters have to make sense. Whatever you do and whatever you say your character does has to make sense. Hey guys, it's your GM and friendly tavern keep, Christian. I was thinking about something while editing this video. Wouldn't it be amazing to be able to play as a race that is insanely wealthy? A race that has access to money at any given point. Well, in my new upcoming game, OneShard, you can do just that. Play as the Hyperoid race, a race of Elytrians, technological invaders from a distant planet. While playing as this race, you have access to free money every day, up to 50 credits a day. You also have the power of influence through wealth. What that means is at any given point, you can enter a village, town, city, and you can do an act of philanthropy. On top of being very well known in town, you now gain influence. You now have status. From that point forward, anytime that you, the player, does a charisma-based feat in town, whether that is trying to persuade an NPC, whether that is trying to talk to somebody and get into a building, you now gain advantage on all charisma-based rolls. On top of that, you also get glamorous prosthetics that you augmentate yourself with level by level. And not only are these prosthetics beautiful and signify your status and wealth, they also do devastating attacks and effects. Play as the insanely wealthy 1% class, the Hyperoid race, in my new upcoming game, OneShard. Use your wealth, prosthetics, power, and influence to shape the world around you into silver, platinum, and gold. If playing as this race sounds interesting and exciting to you, then I suggest subscribing to the channel. In future videos, we will be going over more of my game, OneShard, and we will be talking about the insane new races that you can play as. Some of the races you can look forward to are the Chaturanga Knight, a chess-based marble golem knight that is able to summon allies from their home world, the board. summon pawns, knights, bishops, and eventually your king and your queen. Also play as the Persona, a AI robot that is able to change their appearance at will and use their drone cameras for infiltration and reconnaissance. Play as other races like the Credora, Cinematonic, Mitlatis, the Tax Collector, and of course the Infected. We will be talking about much more about races and how my game works mechanic-wise in a later video, so for now, let's get back to the video at hand. Now that you know how to dictate your character's action in-game, let's talk about how we decide whether those actions are considered successes or failures. And to do that, we must first talk about stat blocks. So what is a stat block? A stat block is a numerical representation of your character's physical and mental attributes. For example, if your character is a bodybuilder, then they are most likely going to have a very high number in their strength stat block. If your character is a biophysicist, then they are most likely going to have a very high number in their intelligence stat block. D&D, the most popular TTRPG on the market, uses a 6 stat block system for characters and monsters alike. Those stat blocks include strength, dexterity, constitution, wisdom, intelligence, and charisma. The strength stat is used to identify feats of physical strength, whether that be lifting a boulder or punching somebody in the face. Dexterity is used to determine feats of agility and acrobatics, so if you are a gymnast, then you will be very high in a dexterity stat block. Constitution is how much physical damage or how much damage the character can take, how tough they are. Wisdom represents your innate sense and knowledge of the general world and how it works. Intelligence is all about what your character has learned, whether that is through reading books, studying at a school, whether it is mathematics. It is more of a scholarly approach. Charisma is based around how charismatic your player is, whether they are good at talking to people, whether they are entertainers, actors. These are all charisma-based feats. So now that we know what stat blocks are, let's talk about how they affect actions that your character makes in tabletop role-playing games and whether they are successes or failures. When your character makes an action in game, they will first declare said action. Then you will roll a dice. In most cases, it will be a d20 dice, which looks like this. Once you roll that dice, you then add the number that you rolled to whatever modifier applies. For example, if you are a strength-based fighter and you're making an attack roll, you will roll your d20. In this case, I rolled an 8. And then you would add your modifier for your strength stat block. The modifier is just the number attached to it. For some TTRPGs, the modifier increases by a set number. For example, if you have a 10 and your modifier increases every 2, then that means your modifier is +5. It's very confusing. We don't need to get into the math bits of it right now. We can do that in a later video. But just know that in order to dictate an action as a success or failure, you roll a dice, usually a d20, and you add whatever number you rolled to the specific stat modifier that you are using. As simple as that. After rolling your d20 and adding your stat modifier, the total number that you now have is your DC, or dice count. Usually for an action, there is a DC that you have to beat. The higher the number that you have to beat, the harder the action usually is. For example, if you are trying to lift a 2-pound rock, the DC is going to be something along the lines of a 1 or 2. Anybody can lift a 2-pound rock. Now, if you are trying to move a 1,000-pound boulder and you don't have very strong strength stats, then the DC for that might be somewhat astronomical in the number of 25 or 30, which is very difficult to beat considering that the highest number you can roll on a dice is 20. Now, that being said, there is also a mechanic when it comes to the d20 dice that most tabletop role-playing games use. D&D is no exception. This mechanic is a critical failure and a critical success. Anytime you roll a 1 on the 20-sided dice, that is considered a critical failure, an automatic failure, and the worst case scenario happens. A 20 roll on the 20-sided dice, or d20, is an automatic success. It means you crit. That is a critical success. Either you do exactly what it is you said that you wanted to do when you were dictating your action, or if you're doing an attack, you usually deal double damage. Rolling a 1, really bad. Rolling a 20, best thing you can do. As simple as that. Now that we've briefly talked about what a D20 is and its importance to the game, we'll go over the different type of dice that most games use. A lot of TTRPG systems use the full array of dice that you see before us. They go anywhere from a 4-sided dice, or a D4, from a D6, an 8-sided D8, a D12, and the D20. There is also this oddball right here, the percentile dice, which has numbers 0 all the way up to 90. This guy is barely used. You're still going to get it in the set if you buy yourself a dice set. It's fun. You can spin it like a top every now and then. Let's see if we can do it. You can spin it like a top. There we go. It spun a little bit. Now that we've talked about and played around with some dice, just remember that almost all tabletop role-playing games will use the full array of dice minus the percentile. But there are some, such as the Dragon Age tabletop role-playing game, that uses only the D6 dice system. If you are going to start tabletop role-playing games, I suggest that you go out and buy yourself a set of dice. They are very cheap. All of the colored dice, which you see here, I got off Temu for like $5, and they all came in the same pack. You can also support your local hobby shop if you have any near you. If not, Amazon, Temu, any online dealer can give you a dice set for relatively cheap. Now that we have both talked about and played with some dice, now that we've talked about what a tabletop role-playing game is, now that we've talked about stat blocks and how that affects your character's role-playing in-game, the last thing that I want to talk about today is something that I feel like a lot of players and GMs end up forgetting after a while, especially once you've been playing games like this for a long time. And that is, this is a game. This is one of the most beautiful, fantastically creative games ever created, in my opinion. But remember, it is a game. The point of it is to have fun. The point is to get together with your friends, family, coworkers, and to enjoy yourself and escape from the realities of the real world for a little bit. So, that being said, even though this is a game, you can end up becoming very invested and very attached to things in games, such as non-existent players, NPCs. I've seen people cry over losing their pets in game. It becomes real. And with that, it is also very emotional. So whenever you are playing D&D or any type of tabletop role-playing game, remember, emotions can be high. You're all having fun. Everything is great. Keep it nice and simple. Keep it relaxed. Have fun. That's the main thing. Tabletop role-playing games are not made to stress you out. They are the exact opposite. And I find that a lot of GMs and players sometimes get too caught up in rule sets or the nitty-gritty of the role-playing game. And I found that it's best to always remind yourself, this is a game. Before we end today's video, as I'm sure you guys have noticed, we are not filming at the usual location today. We are not at the tavern. We are at what is going to be known from here on out as the Tavern 2.0. Whether we are filming at the tavern or at this location, the quality and the content of the channel will remain the same. You will always get tips, tricks, in-depth conversation, and good times. The tavern will remain. The location may change. With that being said, join us next video for tips and tricks on character creation and examples of different types of TTRPGs and how the rule sets and game styles change from RPG to RPG. We hope you join us for in-depth conversation, tips, tricks, and good times. And as always, at the tavern, the drinks are on the house. Hope to see you next time.